What if I told you that the reason you can't stop overthinking isn't because you think too much, but because you've been trying to stop it the wrong way your entire life? Every day, millions of people wake up mentally exhausted before their day even begins. Not because they worked all night or didn't get enough sleep, but because their minds never truly stopped running. The moment they open their eyes, the questions begin. Did I say the wrong thing yesterday? What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if I made a mistake? What if something goes wrong tomorrow? Before they even leave their bed, they have already lived through dozens of imaginary disasters. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. But here's what most people never realize. Overthinking isn't actually the problem. The real problem is what overthinking is trying to do for you. Despite what most motivational quotes on the internet tell you, your brain isn't trying to sabotage your life. It's trying to protect you. And that changes everything. For years, psychology treated overthinking as a bad habit that needed to be eliminated, something people should suppress, ignore, or fight against. But modern psychology reveals something much more interesting. Your brain evolved over hundreds of thousands of years for one primary purpose: survival. Long before smartphones, deadlines, social media, and modern stress, our ancestors survived because they constantly anticipated danger. The people who imagined worst-case scenarios often avoided real threats. Their brains scanned for problems, predicted risks, and prepared for disasters before they happened. Because that strategy helped them stay alive, those same mental systems still exist inside your brain today. The problem is that your brain evolved for a world that no longer exists. Thousands of years ago, the threat might have been a predator hiding nearby. Today, the threat is a text message that hasn't been answered, an upcoming presentation, an awkward social interaction, or a mistake you made years ago that nobody else even remembers. Yet your brain reacts almost exactly the same way. It treats uncertainty as danger, and because uncertainty can never be fully eliminated, your mind keeps searching for answers long after useful thinking has ended. This is where most people become trapped. They believe overthinking happens because they haven't found the right answer yet, so they continue analyzing, replaying conversations, imagining future scenarios, and trying to solve every possible problem before it even exists. But psychology shows that overthinking rarely creates clarity. In fact, the more you chase certainty, the more uncertain you often become. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. At first, the mirror helps you notice details and make improvements. But if you stare into that same mirror for 6 hours, tiny imperfections begin to look enormous. You start seeing flaws that didn't bother you before. The tool that once provided clarity begins creating distortion. That's exactly what happens when thinking becomes overthinking. One of the biggest myths is that intelligent people are less likely to overthink. In reality, intelligence often fuels it. Highly analytical people can generate endless possibilities, scenarios, and outcomes. Their minds become powerful simulation machines. Unfortunately, the brain doesn't always distinguish between imagined danger and real danger. Every possibility starts feeling important. Every uncertainty feels urgent. Every hypothetical situation demands attention. This creates one of the most dangerous psychological traps of all, the illusion of control. Post-overthinkers believe that if they think hard enough, long enough, or carefully enough, they will eventually feel safe. They believe one more analysis, one more plan, or one more mental rehearsal will finally eliminate uncertainty. But certainty is a moving target. Every answer creates another question. Every solution reveals another potential problem. The finish line keeps moving farther away. Psychologists call this reassurance seeking. A person feels anxious, so they think. The thinking provides temporary relief. For a brief moment, they feel prepared, informed, and in control. But because the relief doesn't last, anxiety eventually returns. Then they start thinking again. The cycle repeats itself endlessly. What feels like problem solving slowly becomes a mental addiction. Here's the shocking part. The harder you try to stop thinking, the stronger overthinking often becomes. In a famous psychology experiment, participants were told not to think about a white bear. Predictably, they couldn't stop thinking about a white bear. The human mind doesn't respond well to suppression. When you tell yourself not to think about something, your brain first has to identify the thought you're trying to avoid. Ironically, the effort to eliminate the thought keeps it alive. That's why so much popular advice fails. People hear things like, just stop thinking, clear your mind, or don't worry about it. But anyone who has struggled with overthinking knows how useless that advice feels. It's like telling someone drowning in the ocean to stop being wet. The advice ignores how the mind actually works. The truth is that overthinking isn't solved through force. It's solved through understanding. When you understand why your brain generates these thoughts, you stop treating them like enemies. You begin seeing them for what they really are. Protective mechanisms that have become overactive. Imagine a smoke alarm that goes off every time you make toast. The alarm isn't broken because it sounds. It's broken because it's sounding at the wrong time. That's exactly what happens with overthinking. Your threat detection system becomes too sensitive. It starts treating uncertainty, embarrassment, rejection, failure, and imperfection as emergencies. One of the most powerful discoveries in modern psychology is that thoughts themselves are not the problem. Your relationship with your thoughts is the problem. Most overthinkers don't just experience anxious thoughts. They become fused with them. They treat every thought as a fact. Every fear becomes a prediction. Every possibility becomes reality. But thoughts are not reality. A thought is simply a mental event, nothing more. The moment you learn to observe thoughts instead of automatically believing them, everything begins to change. Instead of saying, "I'm going to fail," you learn to say, "I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail." That may sound like a small difference, but psychologically, it's enormous. One statement feels like reality. The other recognizes the thought as a temporary mental experience. That small shift creates distance, and distance creates freedom. The people who successfully overcome chronic overthinking don't reach a magical point where negative thoughts disappear forever. They reach a point where those thoughts no longer control their actions. They stop demanding certainty before taking risks. They stop waiting until they feel completely confident. They stop negotiating with every fear their mind produces, because here's the ultimate paradox. Action creates clarity far more effectively than thinking ever will. Most answers are found through experience, not analysis. The overthinker sits in a room trying to predict the future. The successful person steps into uncertainty and learns from reality. Your mind will always generate possibilities. That's its job. But your life is determined by which possibilities you choose to follow. Every moment spent trapped inside endless mental simulations is a moment not spent living, creating, connecting, growing, or experiencing the real world. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson psychology has discovered about overthinking. Freedom doesn't come from controlling every thought. Freedom comes from realizing you don't have to. The goal was never to stop thinking. The goal was to stop believing that every thought deserves your attention. And once you understand that, overthinking begins to lose its power.